All right, so get this. Today we're taking a deep dive into a book that's all about finding peace. In a world that feels like it's constantly on fast forward. We're talking about Eckhart Tolle's The Power of Now.
Oh, interesting choice.
Yeah, and we're going to try to unpack some seriously intriguing concepts, like this whole idea that our ego is like a separate voice in our heads, and something called the pain body.
Okay, I'm intrigued.
Right, might sound kind of out there. I know. But stick with us, because this deep dive is going to break it all down and hopefully help you grasp the core ideas from this book, even if you haven't actually read the whole thing.
Sounds good to me. So what's really fascinating about The Power of Now is how Tolle kind of turns our usual understanding of time on its head. He basically says that the only true reality is the now, which is a pretty radical shift from how we usually spend our time, thinking about the past or worrying about the future.
Totally. I mean, how often are we actually fully present in this moment? It's like I'm constantly either replaying something I messed up yesterday
Yeah.
or stressing about what's coming next week. Is that kind of what Tolle means by suffering?
Exactly. He sees that constant dwelling on past regrets
Yeah.
and future anxieties as like the root of so much of our stress and unhappiness. We're so busy focusing on what isn't happening that we miss out on the peace that's available to us right now.
Yeah, that makes sense. So then how do we actually stop our minds from doing that, from time traveling all over the place?
Well, this is where Tolle introduces this concept of the ego, which he describes as that judgmental voice we all have in our heads. You ever notice how that voice seems to comment on like everything you do?
Oh my gosh, yes. Constantly.
Right.
It's like a never-ending stream of, why did you say that? Or you should be doing this instead. Ugh, it's
Yeah.
exhausting. And it really does feel like a separate entity sometimes.
Exactly. That's precisely how Tolle describes it. It's like this mental pattern. But we mistake it for our true selves, and it doesn't stop there. He also brings up this idea of the pain body, which is essentially all the accumulated emotional pain we carry from our past.
Okay, wait. This is starting to sound a little scary.
Yeah.
And I'm getting a bit confused. Is this pain body like a real thing? How does it even work?
It's not like a literal monster or anything like that, although it can certainly feel that way sometimes.
I can imagine.
It's more like a collection of all those emotional hurts we've experienced. And, since it's made of pain, it kind of seeks out more pain. It feeds off negative thoughts and keeps us stuck in those patterns.
So you're saying like when you just can't seem to shake a bad mood, no matter what you do.
Yeah, that could very well be your pain body doing its thing.
Wow. Okay. So if we're caught in this cycle of the ego's judgment and this plain body's negativity, how do we even begin to break free? Tolle talks about practicing presence, right?
Yeah.
But what does that actually look like in everyday life?
It's essentially about learning to observe our thoughts and feelings, without getting completely carried away by them. So instead of immediately reacting to every thought or emotion, we just notice it. It's like we're creating space between ourselves and that mental chatter.
Okay, so how is that any different from just thinking? It sounds like I'm just thinking about my thoughts.
It's a subtle shift, but it makes a big difference. It's about moving from thinking about your thoughts to simply noticing them. Think of it like watching cars go by on a busy street. You see them, right? But you don't jump in front of each one. You're simply observing.
Okay, I think I'm starting to get it.
And that's how we can start to relate to our thoughts, just observing them without getting caught up in their story.
So are there any specific techniques Tully suggests for this whole observing thing?
One of the simplest and most effective techniques is focusing on your breath. When you feel yourself getting hooked by worries or anxieties, just bring your attention to your breath. Notice the sensation of each inhale and exhale. It's a way to kind of anchor yourself in the present moment.
Oh, interesting. So it's like a reset button for your mind. But if we can do that, if we can practice being present, does that mean we'll never feel stressed or anxious again?
Well, it's not really about eliminating those feelings entirely. It's more about changing our relationship to them. And that's where the idea of surrender comes in.
Oh, right. Surrender. That word really jumped out at me when I was reading the book. But it sounds a bit passive, doesn't it? Like giving up.
It's not about giving up on your goals or dreams or anything like that. It's more about accepting what is in this moment, without resistance. Tolle uses a great example of being stuck in a traffic jam.
Oh, yeah. I think we've all been there, fuming and honking the horn, which,
Yeah.
of course, just makes the whole experience even worse. So you're saying I shouldn't be trying to escape the traffic jam mentally?
Not necessarily.
But doesn't that mean I'm just giving up?
It's not about giving up. It's about accepting what you can't control. Instead of fuming and getting all stressed out, you can use that time to listen to your favorite podcast or enjoy the scenery or simply practice being present with the sensations in your body. It's about choosing how you experience the situation.
So accepting the reality of the traffic jam, even though it's not what I want, could actually make me feel less stressed.
It might sound counterintuitive, but that's exactly what Tolle suggests. When we stop resisting what is, we create space for peace to emerge.
Huh, that's a powerful idea. But how do we know when to actually take action to change something and when to just surrender? It seems like a tricky balance.
That's a great question, and it's something Tolle addresses in the book. By emphasizing the importance of awareness, he sees awareness as this powerful tool that allows us to see our thoughts and feelings more clearly, like shining a light on them.
Okay, so awareness is like a superpower,
In a way, yes.
and that's what helps us decide when to act and when to surrender. This is getting really interesting. I'm starting to see how all these ideas from the power of now can actually help us navigate those everyday challenges,
Yeah.
with a little more grace and a lot less stress.
Exactly. It's about shifting our perspective
Yeah.
and learning to tap into that inner peace that's always available to us.
I love it. Well, we've covered a lot of ground already, and I know we have a lot more to unpack. So we'll be back next time to continue our deep dive into the power of now.
Sounds good. Looking forward to it.
So last time we were starting to talk about this whole idea of awareness as a tool for navigating life's challenges. It all sounds pretty profound, but also kind of vague.
Hmm?
Can you break it down for us a little more? What exactly is awareness, and how do we actually cultivate it?
Well, awareness might sound kind of mystical, but Tolle actually describes it in very practical terms. He sees awareness as a kind of light. The kind that dissolves negative thinking? Imagine like shining a spotlight on those dark, shadowy thoughts. That's what awareness can do.
Okay, I like that image, shining a light on those thoughts. But how do we actually flip that switch and turn on the light of awareness? It can't be as easy as just deciding to be more aware, right?
It's more about creating the conditions for awareness to arise. And one of the simplest ways to do that is to simply start noticing. Noticing what's happening within us. Our thoughts, our feelings, our bodily sensations. Not judging them, not trying to change them, just observing them.
So it's like taking a step back
Yeah.
and becoming an observer of our own mind, almost like we're watching a movie of our own thoughts and feelings, instead of getting swept away by the plot.
Exactly. And the more we practice this, the more we realize that we are not our thoughts. We have thoughts, but they don't define us. Just like you can watch a movie without becoming the characters. You can observe your thoughts without getting completely entangled in them.
This reminds me of how we were talking about the ego as a separate voice. It's like once you become aware of it, you can start to see that it's not really you. You can
Right.
create some distance between yourself and that judgmental voice.
That's a great connection. Awareness gives us the ability to choose how we respond to our thoughts and feelings, rather than just automatically reacting to them. We're not at the mercy of every thought that pops into our heads.
Okay, I see. So let's say I'm feeling anxious about giving a presentation at work. If I can just be aware of that anxiety, does that mean it magically disappears? Because that would be pretty amazing.
It's not necessarily about making the feeling disappear. It's more about seeing it clearly, without judgment. And you might be surprised to find that when you do that, the anxiety doesn't feel quite so overwhelming.
So instead of thinking, oh my God, I'm so anxious, I can't do this, it's more about saying, okay, I'm noticing that there's some anxiety here. What can I do to take care of myself in this moment?
Exactly. Awareness gives us the space to respond to challenging situations, with more wisdom and compassion, rather than just reacting from a place of fear or panic.
That makes so much sense. It's like we're expanding our options for how to deal with those difficult emotions. It's not about pretending they're not there. It's about choosing how we respond to them.
Right, and that's one of the things that makes Tolle's work so appealing. It's not about becoming some kind of emotionless robot. It's about embracing our humanity with all its imperfections, including those difficult emotions.
That's so true. That's what makes the power of now so relatable. It's not about denying our feelings. It's about finding a healthier way to be with them. Speaking of feelings, Tolle also talks about the importance of finding joy in simple things, right? Like just appreciating a beautiful sunset or savoring a delicious meal.
Absolutely. That's a key part of living in the now. When we're not caught up in our thoughts about the past or future, we're able to fully experience the richness of the present moment.
I'm starting to realize how much we miss out on. When our minds are always somewhere else, it's like we've been walking around with blinders on, missing all the beauty and joy that's right in front of us.
And the irony is that when we do focus on the present moment, even the most ordinary things can become extraordinary. The key is to be fully present for them. without the distraction of all that mental chatter.
It's like we've been searching for happiness in all the wrong places, looking for some big dramatic experience, when really it's about finding those little moments of magic in everyday life. It almost sounds too simple to be true.
It might sound simple, but it's not always easy. Our minds are very good at pulling us out of the present moment, but with practice, it does become more natural to come back to that place of presence. And that's where the true joy lies.
Okay, so let me play devil's advocate here for a second. What if we get so focused on the present moment that we completely forget to plan for the future? Like, does this mean I should just quit my job and go live on a beach somewhere?
That's a great question. It's not about ignoring the future altogether. It's about finding a balance between being present and taking responsible action for the future.
So how do we find that balance? How do we stay present without becoming irresponsible or neglecting our obligations?
It all comes back to that awareness we've been talking about. When we're truly present, we can see more clearly what needs to be done, and we can take action from a place of calm and clarity, rather than fear or anxiety.
So it's not about being passive or burying our heads in the sand. It's about approaching life's challenges with more awareness and intention.
You got it. And that's what makes The Power of Now so profound. It's not just a self-help book. It's a guide to living a more fulfilling and meaningful life.
This has been an incredibly eye-opening deep dive so far. I'm really starting to see how all these ideas fit together to create a different way of being in the world. But we've covered a lot of ground, and I know our listeners are probably eager to hear how it all wraps up. What can we expect in the final part of our deep dive into the power of now?
You're right, we've covered a lot. In the next part, we'll bring all these ideas together and explore how they can help us navigate life's challenges with more peace, presence, maybe even a little more joy. Join us then.
All right, so welcome back to our deep dive into Eckhart Tolle's The Power of Now. You know, we've explored some pretty mind-bending ideas about the ego, the pain body, and the importance of presence. But how does it all come together in the end? What's the big takeaway here?
Well, if you only remember one thing from this whole deep dive, it should be this. True peace and happiness are available to us right now, regardless of our circumstances. Whatever's going on in our lives.
Because you're saying we don't have to wait for things to be perfect
Yeah,
or for all our problems to magically disappear. We can find that inner peace right now, like in the middle of all the chaos.
exactly. It's not about achieving some ideal state of being. It's about tapping into the peace that's already within us and all the concepts we've been discussing.
Okay, so that makes sense. But let's get real for a second. What about those times when things are really tough, like when you're going through something major, like a job loss or a breakup? Can these ideas from The Power of Now actually help in those moments?
Absolutely. First, it's crucial to acknowledge that it's okay to feel those difficult emotions, like sadness, grief, anger, disappointment. These are all natural human responses. So don't try to suppress them or pretend you're not feeling them.
So it's not about putting on a happy face and pretending everything's fine. It's more about acknowledging the pain and allowing yourself to feel it.
Exactly. And that's where awareness comes in. By simply noticing those feelings without judgment, you create space for them to move through you, without getting completely swept away by them.
So instead of getting caught up in the story of why is this happening to me, or I'll never be happy again, it's more about just observing the feelings of sadness or anger without letting them take over.
Right. And remember those practical tips we talked about earlier, like focusing on your breath, that can be incredibly helpful in those tough moments. When you focus on your breath, you're shifting your attention away from those painful thoughts and back to your body, back to the now.
Right. It's like hitting the pause button on all that mental chatter
Yeah,
and giving yourself a moment to just be.
exactly. And then there's the idea of surrender, which can be especially challenging in those difficult times. But remember, surrender isn't about giving up. It's about accepting what is.
Right, like in that traffic jam example.
Yeah.
We can't just magically make the traffic disappear,
Yeah.
but we can choose how we respond to it.
Exactly. So in a difficult situation, instead of resisting what is, ask yourself, what can I accept about this moment? And maybe you can accept that you're feeling sad or angry. Maybe you can accept that you don't have all the answers right now. Acceptance doesn't mean you had to like the situation. It simply means you're acknowledging reality.
It's like that saying, what you resist persists. The more we fight against our feelings, the stronger they seem to become. But when we surrender to them, they lose some of their power.
That's a great insight. The pain body kind of thrives on resistance. When we surrender, we're taking away its fuel.
This is all making so much sense, but it also feels like a lot to remember, especially when you're in the middle of a tough situation. Do you have any advice for someone who's just starting out with these ideas?
Start small. Don't try to change everything overnight. Maybe choose one practice to focus on, like focusing on your breath for a few minutes each day, or simply noticing when your ego is running the show. And see how it feels. Remember, it's a journey, not a destination.
Yeah. And you don't have to be perfect at it either. We're all learning and growing. It's about progress, not perfection.
Exactly. And the more you practice, the more natural these ways of being will become.
Well, this has been an amazing deep dive into the power of now. I feel like I have a whole new understanding of how to approach life's challenges, but I also feel like this is just the beginning. It sparked a whole new set of questions for me.
Oh, what kind of questions?
Well, if our thoughts aren't really us, then who are we? What's this awareness that's observing our thoughts? It feels like there's a whole other level of exploration here.
Those are great questions, and they point to the heart of what Tolle is trying to get at. The power of now is really just the starting point, an invitation to a deeper journey of self-discovery. And maybe we can even do another deep dive in the future to explore that further.
Yeah, I'm totally in. But for now, I think we've given our listeners a lot to think about. So to everyone listening, we encourage you to check out The Power of Now and see what resonates with you. And remember, the present moment is always available to us. It's just a matter of choosing to step into it. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the power of now.